Shabbat Shalom. On this Shabbat Bereshit, this Shabbat of creation, our Torah reading describes God placing a fiery, ever-turning sword at the entrance to the Garden of Eden to guard and protect the Tree of Life. Tomorrow will mark precisely 1 year since that fateful day when that Tree of Life was desecrated by way of the murderous rampage of an anti-Semitic gunman. 11 of God's creation shot dead at Pittsburgh's Tree of Life Synagogue. 11 souls who woke up that Shabbat morning seeking to do exactly what all of this room sought to do when they woke up: connect to God, connect to community, and connect to our best selves. 11 souls, members of 3 congregations, who wanted to heal our broken world by spending the morning in prayer, study, and fellowship, only to have that aim shattered forever by the murderous acts of a hate-filled gunman. In the days following the Pittsburgh slaughter, our community came together, as did so many communities, in an outpouring of sorrow, solidarity, and outrage. A year has passed, and we remain shaken, the wound still fresh, the families still bereaved. If there's one thing I've learned as a rabbi, it's that nobody ever gets over loss. People just learn to manage it one step, one day at a time. For the families of the slain, for the Pittsburgh Jewish community, for American Jewry, October 27th is a date that will be forever remembered, a wound that will never fully heal. As a congregational rabbi, I know it's a different world. The precautions we take, the community conversations of which I'm a part, and the budget dollars of all Jewish institutions, this one included, now allocated towards security. The ripple effects are felt by all of us. Over the summer, when I go out of town and I attend more modest synagogues, I find myself startled when I do not see a security guard. I catch myself specking out the emergency exits and where they're located. And I know that since that day, despite being Shabbat observant, I now carry a cell phone when I come to synagogue, just in case. The assumptions of American Jewry have changed. We're still post-traumatic. Our unease may not always be visible, but it's altogether present. This weekend, in partnership with synagogues across the country and the AJC's Show Up for Shabbat, we observe the 1-year anniversary since the bloodshed. But the calendar marker, we know, is ultimately arbitrary. We are changed today, tomorrow, and forever. This morning, I want to organize my reflections on the Tree of Life massacre into 4 headings, 4 baskets of reflection, and attempt to put to words some of the harsh realities, lessons learned, and ongoing obligations emergent from that day. Lesson number 1, anti-Semitism. 1 year later, there's a temptation to reflect back on the murderous events and extract some global lessons of universal application. That the root cause of the horror is a general deficit of civility or a general toxicity of our public discourse. No question, we live in a time of escalating hatreds that need to be checked before they're weaponized as they were on that horrific day. And yet we dare not take our eye off the ball and lose sight of the headline: anti-Semitism. It wasn't a refugee center or a civil rights organization or any other institution representing any other political leaning or interest. It was a synagogue, the building of American life associated with Jews, the place to which one goes if one wants to meet Jews or kill them. Yes, we are blessed to live in a time and place where the state-sponsored anti-Semitism of other times and places is not our experience. But anti-Semitism, It is real, it is present, it comes from the right, and it comes from the left. Not just in Poway, not just in Europe, but all over America. According to the ADL, over 50 Jewish institutions targeted since that day in Pittsburgh. We bore witness to the inability of our Congress to call out anti-Semitism, choosing a watered-down resolution condemning discrimination in general. Just across the river, a rising number of anti-Semitic assaults in the Jewish community of Brooklyn. You personally may not feel it, but it is there, on campus, on the internet, and across our country. The world's oldest hatred alive and well, a virus taking on new and more nefarious expressions, the bloodshed of Pittsburgh being the most violent, but far from the exceptional incident. And 1 year later, the blood of our brothers and sisters cries out to us. We dare not lose our sense of outrage. In recalling the dead, some add, Yehi zichronam baruch, may their memories be for a blessing, while others say, Hamakom yikom damam, may God avenge their blood. There are some who interpret the latter to mean that we must take vengeance, an eye for an eye. There are others who say it means that only God can exact vengeance, not humanity. Me, I take it to mean, as our Parsha teaches, that we dare not stand idly by as the blood of our kinsmen is shed. We must lobby officials for public funding of our Jewish institutions, lest our synagogues and schools be forced to choose, by way of the deeds of the anti-Semites, between hiring teachers or security guards. Of course, we should support cross-communal efforts to strengthen our social fabric, like the city's recently launched Office to Prevent Hate Crimes. But as a Jewish community, we have a particular obligation to get engaged in our own parochial well-being. We have to resist the urge to let this become the new normal. We have to keep our public officials attentive. We have to advocate on behalf of law enforcement authorities tasked to fight anti-Semitism, and we must provide support in word and deed to those organizations like the ADL and the AJC, whose sole mission is to protect the interests and well-being of the Jewish community. Lesson number 1, anti-Semitism is alive and well, and our fight must be steadfast. Lesson number 2, look for the helpers. Before the Tree of Life shooting, the typical American associated the Pittsburgh neighborhood of Squirrel Hill with its most famous resident, Mr. Rogers, the icon who famously reminded us that in the face of tragedy, one must look for the helpers, a point made clear in a recent article by Pittsburgh native Nancy Strichman. I think of police officers like Dan Mead, the first responder who was shot as he entered the Tree of Life Synagogue that day. I think of the millions of dollars raised to assist those traumatized by the shooting. I think of the hundreds of thousands of dollars raised by the Muslim community alone. I think of the civic response of the Pittsburgh community, the support of the Pittsburgh Steelers who changed their logo in support of the victims. I think of the thousands of people who came to Pittsburgh from across the country for funerals and memorial services, who rallied together in crisis, the evil intentions of one person prompting countless numbers of kind acts. To be sure, by looking for the helpers, we open ourselves up to the risk of diverting attention from the horror, seeking a Hollywood silver lining in what should be known only as an unmitigated atrocity. No question, focusing on the good does not bring back lives lost or heal families shattered. Nevertheless, in recalling acts of kindness performed in the wake of the massacre, we're reminded of the capacity for a humanity capable of senseless hatred to perform acts of selfless kindness. Is this not the message that God gives to Cain and all of subsequent humanity? That every human being is capable of doing good and evil, and each one of us, if we so choose, can choose kindness, choosing to reach deeper and strive higher in our efforts to mend this broken world of ours. It is a shame that it takes a tragedy to prompt us to look for the helpers. We should be doing it year-round, celebrating and elevating the manifold acts of kindness that bind us together as a humanity. Lesson number 3, choose life. Married as I am to a daughter of Squirrel Hill, I know many of the people and players, lay and professional, leading Pittsburgh's Jewish community. That said, I can't even begin to imagine the financial, emotional, and institutional considerations going into the future of the Tree of Life Synagogue 1 year later, still shuttered. Should that building, pockmarked as it is by bullet holes, be razed to the ground? Should Pittsburghers, as would Israelis following a terrorist attack, close for the afternoon, repaint the walls, and open for business the next day? Maybe it should be turned into a museum honoring the dead and the martyrs of other atrocities committed against the Jewish people, Holocaust included. These are among a few of the options presently being debated by Pittsburgh Jewry. But the question is not just a physical structure one. It's a philosophical question about the path forward in the wake of the tragedy. I am not, to be clear, as voiced by some, of the belief that the only response to Pittsburgh is to live Jewishly. We have to fight anti-Semitism at its root and in all its expressions, verbal, physical, online, and otherwise. And as I made clear on the high holidays, the fact of anti-Semitism, ancient or modern, is simply not a compelling reason to live Jewishly. But I do believe that as Jews, we're obligated to muster the requisite resilience of soul to do what those 11 souls sought to do that final Shabbat morning of their lives, to live quiet, proud, dignified Jewish lives of meaning. We must choose life. I'm reminded of the Midrash regarding creation, the rabbinic tale that I shared over the holidays about God who found the spiritual wherewithal to create a world after experiencing setback. It wouldn't be the worst thing in the world were you to live Jewishly, if only to thumb your nose at the anti-Semites. But ultimately, we need to live proud Jewish lives, not because people have tried, are trying, and will try to do us harm. We need to live proud and joyful Jewish lives because it's our right, our privilege, and our obligation to do so. We need to do so because, like those slain, we believe in the power of the Jewish people and the role of a synagogue to inspire, educate, and support its membership towards living passion-filled Jewish lives. We need to choose life. Fourth, finally, and most obviously, we need to remember. We need to pause today to meditate on the lives lost that day, each one a universe of his or her own. I think of the decision of each of those Jews to go to synagogue that morning, the connection each of them had to their God, their tradition, and their community. I didn't know any of them personally, and I imagine most of us here did not either. But I imagine them to be the sort of folk in shul on any given Shabbat morning. This one sitting by the door, greeting the newcomer, perhaps pointing out the page number we're on in our prayer book. Another one sitting on their own, contemplating a life transition, perhaps observing a yahrzeit or celebrating an anniversary. Another one maybe trying her best to keep to her New Year resolution to be more engaged in Jewish life by coming to shul every week. This one maybe comes every week, constantly kvetching, always sharing how great the shul would be if only the rabbi would listen to his or her input. We may not know them, but we are them, and we remember them, each one a kinsman slain. Joyce Feinberg, Richard Gottfried, Rose Mallinger, Jerry Rabinowitz, Cecil Rosenthal, David Rosenthal, Bernice Simon, Sylvan Simon, Daniel Stein, Melvin Wax, and Irving Young, our brothers and sisters gunned down for no reason other than their decision to do what all of us are doing, attend synagogue on a Shabbat morning. It's 1 year later. Today we stand outside the garden of our innocence, never to return. The tree of life has been violated. Our sense of security, if we ever had it, is no more. We step forward into a world far more frightening than we ever thought possible. May we heal, may we find our way, and most of all, today and always, may we remember those slain 1 year ago. Yeheh zichronam baruch, may their memories be for a blessing. Hamakom yikom damam, may God avenge their blood. Please rise for the memorial prayer.
Shalom.